doing tax and accounting, bookkeeping, payroll, a little bit of outsourced CFO, virtual CFO type work, mostly focusing on solopreneurs, freelancers, small agencies, that kind of thing. So a lot of one, two, maybe three-person partnerships, S corps, that sort of stuff, is what I'm primarily working with, and and been doing that for the last little over 5 years now.
Wow. Good for you. I can't believe you went all through getting a PhD and then said, this isn't for me, but I get
And yeah,
it.
I got the EA, and I was fine. Like I don't get into the credential battle, right? What matters at the
Yeah.
end of the day is, can you help your clients, right? It doesn't
Um,
matter what license or credential you have. And But for me personally, I didn't want to wake up one day and think, well, what if, right?
mhm.
What if I had gotten that? And so in about well, right before COVID. Late 19, I started going. I actually had to go back to school, right? Because none of my coursework was in business or accounting. So I signed up for an online Master of Accounting program, and got the credits I needed to be able to take the exam, and passed all three parts first time. Passed three of the four parts
Woo!
first time. Audit, I had to go, which I started off in tax. I don't do audit, and so audit, I think I got maybe like 72, 73, something like that, a couple times,
Ah,
and then finally, just the night before the third time, I just stayed up all night with the books and said, there's no way I'm doing this again,
yeah.
and wound it up getting, I think, high 70s, just enough to pass. But yeah, so right at a little over a year ago, I got the CPA license too.
Oh,
And it's funny because you wake up the next morning and nothing's really changed, right? You've got the same
yeah.
clients, you got the same firm, you've
Yeah.
got the same work to do. But the I felt a little bit of accomplishment from doing that. And
Yeah.
with just an EA, I never corrected a client if they introduced me as their CPA.
Yeah.
I was clear. I never called myself that, and
Right.
I would let people know I wasn't one if they asked. But yeah, there was always that feeling. But yeah, absolutely. So it's definitely been a wild ride. It's been fun, but I love the work I'm doing. I love being able to. I came from academia, higher education, where I
Hmm.
was doing a lot of research, doing a lot of teaching, and everything's an experiment when
Hmm.
when you're an academic, right? And so I look at my clients, I look at their businesses, and I try, part of the way I try not to get overwhelmed. I try to empathize with them. I try to put myself in
Hmm.
their shoes, and we can really easily get carried away. With that, sometimes we can start becoming sympathetic to them, and the way I try
Yeah.
to keep that at bay is just look at it as an experiment. Let's
Mm.
try a little bit more of this, let's try a little bit of that, and see what happens. And at
I
the end of the day, just try to be as helpful as I can be.
I love that as an experiment because it's true. There is a bit of a path for most entrepreneurs, and I'm with you. I love helping them, and I bet your teaching background has helped you to be able to talk to them and to be able to take everything that you know and give it to them too.
It was, the lecturing, the getting up in front of the
Mm.
classes and giving talks, and I try to do as much of this kind of webinars and
Mm.
conferences and talks and that kind of stuff. I try to do as much of that as possible, because I still have that sense of being a teacher in me. But where the real interesting conversations and the real connections happen were in the office hours, where the
Mm.
one-on-one meetings, and so now, I pretty much flipped that, right? Like the majority of
Mm.
the work I was doing in academia was conference talks and lecturing, and every now and then I'd get, every semester you have one or two students that really kind of cling
Mhm.
on, and they'll come to your office hours a few times in the semester, and look for some extra guidance, look for some extra help. And now I flipped that, right? All my clients are paying me, they're coming to me one on one, they're really trying to get help, they're really trying to get advice. But I still like to supplement with this kind of these kind
Yeah.
of opportunities.
Yeah, those one-on-one conversations are so rewarding,
Oh
and
man.
it fuels you to keep going. It really is. I'm with you on that. It's the juice that keeps us going. So today we were talking about how to streamline processes, and is there a process that you have streamlined that has worked out for you, or
Yeah, a few. I think one sort of meta, and then one more in particular. But the meta one is one that I learned pretty quickly because, like I said, this is my second career. I came into accounting with no prior knowledge. I had no idea of how taxes work, how bookkeeping worked, how to run an accounting firm. None of that. I had done none of that kind of work when I came into this, and but I was lucky to have a really good mentor. And he had a lot of experience, and he had a lot of strong ideas about how to run an accounting firm and how to help clients and those kinds of things. So for the first couple of years, I just kind of latched on and adopted, lock, stock, and barrel his way of doing things. And I every time I felt the urge to kind of go off his script, I would rein myself back in and say, "You're still learning. Just
Mhm.
stick to the script." But take note, right? Take notes of what doesn't feel quite right, because at some point I'm going to have to make this my own firm, right? I can't always just be copying what my mentor is doing. At some point I got to make this my own firm. So I'm not quite there yet, but so in the meantime I was just taking notes of all these things that was just like, this doesn't quite feel right, this doesn't quite work for me, this doesn't seem
Mhm.
like the best way to do this for my clients. One of the big things was, like I said, I started off working with freelancers, solopreneurs, small agency owners, these kinds of things. And my mentor only wanted to do the tax work. He had bookkeepers that he would refer his clients to. This was about the time. This was 5-ish years ago. So Gusto was becoming the
Just
next big
new.
thing in
Yeah.
in the world of helping small businesses manage payroll, those sorts of things. So he would outsource the bookkeeping, or he would refer them out to bookkeepers. He would refer them to Gusto to do the payroll. And I just saw how many times my clients would come back during tax time, and even though I'd helped them get set up on Gusto, they had never actually run their payroll. As a solo S corp owner, right? Or
Yeah.
even though I had helped them get set up on QuickBooks Online, they had never actually done any of their bookkeeping. And so I learned after those first couple of years that for the kinds of clients that I want to work with and the way I want to work with them, it's not enough to trust them to do all of
Mhm.
the accounting throughout the year and then me just do the tax return. I needed to take care of all of it. And so that sort of that sort of meta process change was changing the way I was positioning myself and
Mhm.
the way I was thinking about selling services to them, because I would start off trying to sell the tax return and then trying to think of the bookkeeping and the payroll and the accounting and all of that as an upsell, right? Maybe I can get them to pay for this
Wow.
too. I flipped that around, right? I
Mhm.
said, no, I'm
Yeah.
going to take care of all of the stuff that you don't want to do, like the bookkeeping,
Mhm.
like the payroll, right? I'm going to take care of all that. And because I've taken care of all that, the tax return is going to be so much easier, right?
Oh my God.
It's
Yeah.
going to be a breeze to just roll all that data into the tax return, and it'll make everything a lot better. Excuse me. So, instead of trying to see the actual accounting work as an upsell, I flipped it to where the tax return's included, right? The tax return's just a reconciliation of everything we did all year long, right? And so that was sort of the big process change, was
Great.
changing the way I was thinking about positioning myself and what I do and how I help the client. One of the sort of micro, I guess, process changes then, was, now that I've sold somebody on this, right? Now that I've signed somebody up to do all this stuff for them, I got to figure out how to manage that and how to get paid for that. So I worked with my mentor all of 18, most of 19, and by late 19, I said, okay, now I'm ready. Right now, I'm going to start implementing all this stuff. And during those first couple of years, my mentor's firm was actually taking care of the billing and the processing of the returns and all that kind of
Mhm.
stuff. And now if I'm going to do my own thing, well, I got to figure out how to do all of that
Yeah.
myself. So I actually I looked at a couple different options for those things, and what really made it a lot easier to choose among the different options was, in late 19, I started working with another firm to handle some of the bookkeeping work, because I had signed up enough clients to where I couldn't do it all myself. So
Mhm.
I signed up with another firm that only wanted to do the accounting, the bookkeeping kind of stuff. He didn't do any tax. And so, as sort of an exchange, he would do my client's bookkeeping, I would do his client's taxes, and we would work together like that. Well, I got his proposal for his firm to do the bookkeeping work. And it came from back then Practice Ignition, now Ignition. And I said, man, this is nice, because up to that point, I had been using a Word document and copying and pasting it to create the engagement
Yeah.
letter for every new client. And then I had to go figure out how to invoice them every month, and I was experimenting. I was experimenting, right? I was experimenting
Yeah.
with value pricing. And so I was charging every client a different price, and all this kind of stuff. And I got that proposal from Ignition, and I wrote him right back, and I said, "Man, how did you do this? What is this?"
Hmm.
So that was the process that I put into place to make sure that I was looking professional, I was behaving
Hmm.
professionally when it came to, look, here's the proposal. Here's how we're going to work together. Here's how much it's going to cost. All you've got to do is digitally sign on the bottom line. The software is going to take care of everything else. And so, yeah, signed up with Ignition in late 19. I've been using it ever since, and it handles all the billing. It handles all the proposals, and getting those signed and that kind of stuff. So, yeah, I definitely like that. Now, there's a few other
Yeah.
options out there, obviously. As far as the functionality, they're all pretty similar. But it's funny because I just got off a call where we were talking about tech stacks, and one of the questions was, well, how do you know which tech to choose, right?
Hmm.
And of course, part of our job is advising our clients and running our own firms, and choosing different technology. And I said, just at the it feels kind of weird to say this, but when it comes down to it, you just got to pick the one that you like. You just got to pick the one that feels and looks good. I said, when I first started, like I said, I had no experience. And
Hmm.
so at the same time, I did Zero's, training, and
Yeah.
QBO's, QuickBooks Online's training, right, at the same time. And I had never had any working
Hmm.
experience with either one of these. And I got done with both of them, and I just said, I got to pick one. Like, I can't do both of them, and try to do, but I got to pick one. Which one do I like better? And I just liked QBO better. And so I
Hmm.
went with that. It could have been Zero, sure, right? But I think when it comes to those kinds of decisions, and the same is for your processes. Does it work for you? Does it feel
Hmm.
good, right? When you wake up in the morning, are you looking forward to doing that kind of work? Where's the friction coming from?
Hmm.
And if there's friction there, can you resolve that friction? Maybe that's a new app. Maybe that's reversing some steps in the
Hmm.
process, in the workflow. Maybe it's getting rid of that client.
Yeah.
I mean, it just depends.
Yeah.
But that's how I try to think about things.
That's actually really insightful. And I like that. That's a good question to ask yourself, is if you like the way the app works. I also use Ignition. Same thing. First time I saw it, I thought, this is so slick. I was so impressed with it. Also, I've been using it for years.
I've had
Um,
clients who are web designers. I mean, it's
yes.
their job to make web tools look and work well. And they write back to me after I send them the proposal, and they say, "What is this? This is nice. Like, I have never interacted with something this
Yeah.
quick and easy to sign up for professional services like this." I've actually gotten a couple of my clients to use
To use
Ignition in
it.
their own businesses.
Uh, Mine too. I love it because it is that easy to use. And I think that's a good point, especially when you're streamlining a process. It has to be easy. It can't
Mhm.
be anything complex because I mean, we're going to talk about delegating. So, what, how have you set up something to delegate? How did
Yeah.
you, so first of all, you started off by yourself.
Mhm.
How did you delegate anything? What was the first step you took, like to delegate anything?
Yeah, and this is like, because again, I had no business background, and but I'm an academic, right? And so one of the first things I started doing was reading books. Like what books can I read to help me figure all this out? And one of the first that I read was Michael Gerber's E Myth. And yeah, and,
Yeah,
and
love that.
if you haven't read it, right, he talks about the
Hmm.
three different types of worker that you have within the business. And if it's just you, right, if you're a solo operator, you're all three. But there's the
Hmm.
technician, the person who actually does the work, right? You can think of the staff accountant, the tax preparer, the bookkeeper, right? The person actually doing the work. There's the manager, the person overseeing the work and making sure the work is is getting done. And then there's the entrepreneur, right? The person that's actually trying to build the business. And, obviously Gerber's point is that we need to spend less and less time as the technician and the manager and more time as the entrepreneur. But when it's just you, you gotta do the work, and you gotta make sure the work's getting done. And hopefully there's a few minutes left to be the entrepreneur, but you're mostly just the technician and the manager. But because I had read that before I really got into the full swing of running my business, it just started off as a side gig. I was still teaching at the university that I was at for the first 6 months. I knew that I needed to build a firm that could, maybe not within a year, maybe not even within a few years, but at some point, this firm needed to be able to run, maybe not necessarily without me, right? But not just only me. And so I immediately started building out processes with the idea and the intention of someday I'm not going to be the one doing all this. And in order to do that, and again, coming from an education background, right? If you have somebody who has never done this kind of work before, and you have to assume they come in with no prior knowledge, right, of how things work, of how things are done, then you've got to be very, very, very detailed and very, very specific. And,
Sure.
something that to us that, if you were right now to just go, like, for example, we just got done with tax season, right? If you were to go say, well, what's the process of doing a tax return? Right. Well, man, at first you would just say, all right, we get the stuff, we put the stuff in the software, we print out the return, we review. But then you start thinking about it and you're like, wait, get the stuff. What does that mean? Right. Well, how do
Yeah.
you just get the stuff? Right. It doesn't just magically show up. Right. There's sub steps. Right. And then each of those sub steps have sub steps, and so you've got to really break things down almost to an atomic level. Right.
Yep.
Of, this keystroke, this mouse click, to that degree. And at the same time, there were a couple tools that had become available that I started using in my firm. One of them is Loom. Loom is a way of recording your screen, and if you've got the audio set up, you can also be talking through while you're doing things. So as you're doing something, you're recording the screen that you see, and you're recording your voice as you're walking through it. And so I just started doing that.
That's awesome.
And almost like the way parents or grandparents will talk about like recording their stories for the future generations, that kind of thing. Think about it almost like that, right? Like you're recording your story of how you're preparing this tax return for the future generation of people working in your firm, right? Of how they're going to do it, and you want them to be able to understand. You want them to be able to do all of those steps the way you were able to do them. You want them to be able to replicate that, right? Well, if you just say, get the information, get the documents, they're not going to want to know. They're not going to know what to do with that. But if you record, this is exactly what I did. This is what I clicked on. This is, what I typed in. Then they've got a fighting chance of being able to do that. So that's one tool. Loom is one tool. Scribe is another. Scribe is similar, but Scribe, instead of it being video, it'll just record the steps, right? It'll record every mouse click, every keystroke, and it will break that up into different steps. So it's really good if you've got a step-by-step workflow. And I just started creating a bunch of those. And so then maybe about 12, 18 months after, I went completely independent in my firm, and I did have the capacity and the need to hire a bookkeeper. When I hired that bookkeeper, I just said, look, here's all these Loom videos. Here's all these Scribe workflows. Here's the workflow set up in the practice manager. And my practice manager, I've got my workflows built out in there in templates, and I'm constantly revising them, right? Almost every time we go through a monthly close, almost every time we prepare a tax return, right? We say, oh, wait a minute, this step, it's not clear enough what needs to happen here. This step, it's actually 2 steps. These 2 steps, they need to be in the reverse order because they don't work in the order that they're in, right? So you're constantly revising these workflows. You're constantly giving more detail to things. And so, yeah, that is the approach to delegation. Delegation is not hiring someone and saying, here, do this now, right? Delegation is building out the processes and the workflows for yourself first, right? And then saying, okay, if I didn't know what I was doing, if this was my first day and I'd never done this before, would this show me how to do it? No? Okay, then I've got more work to do. And then when you get it to that point, then go make your first hire, right?
Yeah.
Then start outsourcing that work.
I agree, because when you pass it off and you don't give them direction, that's called abdication.
There you go. Absolutely.
Scribe How was one of the most powerful tools that I found because I could easily explain something to somebody, clients, team members, anybody. using Scribe How. That was a takeaway that I got from Heather Slatterly at one of the conferences. It was
Yep,
like worth the whole
absolutely.
entire conference.
And Loom, there's a lot of other uses, right? You know,
I,
it's your internal training, but it's also, for
mhm.
example, like I said, we just got done with tax season. I walk through a 1040 with Loom. I don't meet any clients in person. I run an all virtual operation, so we use Loom to do the walkthrough of the
Mhm.
1040, and we get a lot of response back from clients saying, "Thank you so much for the walkthrough. It helps," right? Because if
Yeah.
they don't, if they can't come into your office and sit down at the boardroom table with you and you walk them through line by line of the 1040, if you can't provide that for them, you've got to do that somehow. They won't understand the numbers and the math and the how it all comes together, but just that walking through it makes
Yeah.
them feel empowered, right? It makes them
Uh,
feel like they understand.
Absolutely. This Loom is incredibly powerful. We were using ScreenPal. It's
Yeah,
also was
yeah.
called Screencast-O-Matic, but same thing. It's a powerful tool to be able to use. So what um, what did you find the most difficult? Is there any one thing that you found difficult, like either because you didn't want to give it up, or you didn't know how to give it up, or because it was just hard to pass off?
Yeah, it's the one-off things, right? Like those are always the hardest. And I mean, obviously the hardest thing to delegate, right? In any accounting firm owner, I think would agree with me on this. The hardest thing to delegate is the actual relationship itself, right?
Yeah.
And so, you
Mhm.
know, but there are a lot, right? You look at the firms, and I'm not saying the billion-dollar startup accounting firms. I'm saying real accounting firms, right? That have been able to scale. One of the things that they wind up doing is figuring out a way to delegate the actual relationships, right?
Mhm.
And so it doesn't always have to be a named partner that's meeting with the clients. It doesn't always have to be a named partner that is communicating and explaining things to the clients, right? Have managers and even have seniors, getting involved in
Mhm.
how to communicate and how to explain things to clients, because someday they will be the managers and the partners that need to understand how to do that. So the relationship is difficult. The way I've tried to delegate some of that to the staff that I've had is small things in controlled settings that are not very client intensive. So, you
Mhm.
wouldn't want to do this for like I said, delivering a 1040 to a client, telling them that they owe, $25,000 to the IRS. You don't want to delegate that out, to a staff accountant. But something like, look at this list of vendors that we found in your books last year and let us know if any of these are people that we should send 1099s to,
Mhm.
right? Something like that, where it's like, this is communicating with a client, so we want to be careful. Now, script that out, right? Script that
Yeah.
language out. This is what
Mhm.
the email should say, right?
Yeah.
Don't just let them, you know, hey Joe, tell me if this is right. You
Yeah.
don't want that kind of communication going out to clients. But if you
Yeah.
script that out,
Mhm.
hello client, we reviewed your books last year and we found these vendors that we don't have a W-9 for. Can you please let us know? If you script that kind of language out the way you would write it, if you can write it once, then you can save that
Mhm.
as a template, either in your practice manager, right? Or we use another tool. It's called Text Blaze, and it's a Chrome plugin. But there's Text Blaze, and there's another one that is an application, is a desktop application called Text Expander. And then if you're a Mac user, I am, then there's another tool called Alfred. All of these tools, what they do is you have text snippets. Right, and so you can, if it's a piece of text, it doesn't matter if it's a phrase or if it's an entire email, then you can preload these text snippets and then you can give them a keyboard shortcut, right? So for example, one of mine is semicolon em, and that is my email address. So when I'm typing, if I just type,
Ah.
so like if I'm filling out a form, online to sign up for a newsletter or something like that, and it asks for my email address, all I have to do is semicolon em, and it fills in. It deletes that, and then it
Oh
pastes
my
in
God.
my entire email address. So I don't have to type in my email address every single time. I have another one for my formal name with all the titles and everything, right? Because I don't want to sit there and type out Jeremy
No.
Wells, comma, EA, comma, CP. I don't want to do that every single time. So if I need to actually formally sign off on something, right, then I've got that text snippet. Again, it's like 2 or 3 characters that I've just memorized. Boom, there's my whole name. It also prevents you from doing weird things like misspelling your name. The
Yeah.
other day, mine wasn't working because it was going through an update, and I had to sign up for a call or something. And I did capital W, capital E, LLS for my last name or something. And I'm looking at this on my calendar. Every day I review my calendar, what's coming up for the week, and I keep seeing where I misspelled my name. And it's just so annoying. But if you use one of these tools, it'll save you from doing that. Well, it's not just little things like here's your email address or your phone number.
Yeah.
My fax number is a great one. I can never remember my fax number, right? But every
No.
now and then, I'm filling out a 2848, a power of attorney, something like that. I want to put in my fax number. So I've got one that's just semicolon fax, and it'll paste in my fax number.
Wow.
But so that's one thing. But if you're thinking bigger, sort of issues
Yeah.
like this is an email that we're
Hmm.
routinely sending to clients, right? And so we've sort of scripted out the language, and I want other staff to get used to the idea of communicating with clients, but in these sort of low stakes ways. Well, I'll just build this text snippet out, and you can even set these things up with some what are called dynamic placeholders, right? So instead of hi, client, right, you can actually make it to where the software will ask you for what that input is, right? And you can type in, well, the client's name is John, or Kathy, or whatever, and it'll automatically, when it pastes that snippet into the email, it'll automatically fill in everything the way it should look. So now all you've got to do is click send. And it makes it very easy to not only do it yourself and save yourself some time, but delegate some of that work to your staff.
That's
So yeah,
fantastic.
so it's hard, right? It's one of the hardest things in a firm, delegating some of that, client communication and client relationship. But you can start using some of these tools to kind of figure out some low stakes and easily replicable ways to do that.
And I have to say that's a really good way for someone to learn what voice you want them to talk in, because there is a
Absolutely.
certain way, there's a culture that you have, and it helps people. So that's Text Blaze. That is so cool.
That's
I
the one I use. It's a Chrome
Chrome
extension. You
extension.
you can you can build out a million of these, and then Text Expander and Alfred are the two that I use on my own on my desktop, right? But Text Blaze is easy because you can add, so Text Expander and Alfred, they're just on your desktop and it's just you. Text Blaze I really like because you can add other users to it, right?
Yeah.
And if they're using Chrome, they can add the extension, they sign in with their account, and you can share, or you can just have all the same snippets, or you can create folders of snippets. So I've got a folder that's accounting ones, I got a folder that's tax ones,
Oh,
and a
that's
folder that's
great.
administrative one. So if I hire a VA, I can just share the admin one because they're never going to need the tax or bookkeeping ones. If I hire a bookkeeper, I just share the accounting ones because they're never going to need the tax or the administrative ones. So you can really get fine grained into not just here are these snippets, but
Mm.
I only want you to see the snippets that are relevant to the work that you're doing.
Wow, that is quite the time-saving hack. I love that. So you keep talking to practice management software. What practice management software are you using?
Yeah, so when I signed up for Ignition in late 19, I also looked at a few different options. And because this was a second career, I was a little bit of a productivity nerd. David Allen's Getting Things Done, and a
Uh,
few different things like that, right? So I'd gotten into different kind of project managers and task managers, but in accounting, I wanted something that was built more for a firm. I settled on Carbon at the
mhm.
time, and I like some of the features. Carbon, and I still use it. So Ignition and Carbon, late 19. I went with both of those. I still use those. They're really sort of the keystone of the
They
firm.
link together. Yeah.
Yeah, right, exactly. And somebody signs up in Ignition, the work automatically shows up over in Carbon, along with the client, right? And so it makes it fairly easy to do that. There
Hmm.
are there are a few things that Carbon has introduced over the last couple of years, a few things that they're working on. I like it. I like it. One of the
Good.
things you got to think about when it comes to tech, right, is not just like, is this is this what I want? Is this nice? But there's a million other options,
Oh
and
yeah.
I see a lot of accounting firm owners, especially this time of year. We just got through tax season. Oh, I just got the renewal notice for my tax software. It's so expensive. I don't want to have to pay all that. What other tax software can I use? Right?
Hmm.
Yeah, it's fine. We should definitely be looking for options that aren't too expensive, options that work better, these kinds of things. But you got to keep in mind the switching costs, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Will you be able to easily export and re-import your data into the new system? Probably not, right?
Hmm.
Are you so how are you going to get all those data over, right? One thing about Carbon is it's got that entire history of not just the emails, not just the communication, but all of those comments and tasks and the workflows and all this kind of stuff. You got to think about that. You're gonna switch to a new software, whether it's your practice manager, your tax software, your bookkeeping software. How are you going to get all that out and into the new system? So, I'm all for figuring out the tech that works best for you, but at the same time, just keep those switching costs in mind.
Yeah, and also I think one of the things that we talk about when we're vetting new software is how's the customer service?
Mm-hmm.
Can they, because a lot of these softwares, they do the same thing, but
Yeah,
if the customer service isn't there, it's not going to be worth it.
absolutely.
And what is the keep the end in mind? So what does it look like if I want to switch out of this software? We just
Yep.
made a big jump. We went from Asana to Financial Sense. And I really liked Asana. We have 10 employees, and we were working really well in there. But the one thing that we didn't have, which Carbon has, is you can see everyone's email.
Yes.
So
Yep.
and Financial Sense has that, and we filter in and we can view everybody's conversation, client
My
conversation.
mentor uses and loves Asana, and like because I was working through his firm the first couple of years, I used Asana. It's not practice manager software. It's just
No.
project management software, but it's still good, right? It's still good as far as keeping up with workflows and tasks, and you've got the templates and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, I absolutely. You just have to you've really got to think about, well, you said it with customer service. The second thing is, okay, let's say you're happy with it and you want to stick with it, but it's not just about getting the data out because you want to switch to a different software. Maybe you need to get the data out to put it into some other piece of your tech stack. That's another thing too, right?
Hmm.
So when you're looking at new software, look at either does it have a direct integration with
Mm.
the other major pillars of your tech stack, right? So like for me and my firm, I use QuickBooks Online for accounting, and I use ProConnect, Intuit's cloud-based tax software, right? And so those two,
Right.
they have a direct integration. They're both Intuit products. That's easy, right? I can directly export the financials from QBO into the tax return over in ProConnect. But then, that those are really the only two Intuit products I use. There are other products out there that aren't Intuit products. So the question you have to ask yourself is, do these things talk to one another? Do they have a direct integration? Or if not, do they have APIs where I can connect them through
Mhm.
some sort of bridge like Zapier or Make or something like that that will say, okay, Ignition is a great example, right? Somebody signs up, a new client signs up in
Mhm.
Ignition. So I've got their contact information, I've got the terms of their proposal, I've got their invoices, all that's in Ignition, but I do my accounting in QuickBooks Online, right? So can I get all that information over into QuickBooks Online somehow? I do their
Mhm.
tax returns in ProConnect. Can I get all that contact information over into ProConnect somehow, right? And so another thing when you're looking at different tech and going back to your processes and how to
Mhm.
clean up your process, some of these processes that seem broken, or you're paying somebody to manually go through and move all this information back and forth, it might be possible that you just need to spend a day or maybe go outsource somebody. There are people who are consultants on how to create these integrations through tools like Zapier or Make, and they will build out these integrations for you. And
Mhm.
now all of a sudden, that information will automatically populate throughout your entire tech stack, or at least the major parts of it,
Mhm.
without you having to manually key all that information back and forth. Because there's nothing worse than a new client signing up and sending you a copy of their tax return, and then the next year when you go and prepare their tax return, you get an e-file rejection because you missed their social security by a digit, right? Or something like that, because you had to manually
Well, yeah.
key it in. So if you could figure out a way to just get all of that information to flow throughout your system,
Mhm.
right, it's a lot better, it's a lot safer, it's a lot quicker, it's a lot more efficient.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. If the systems don't all connect together, it makes it very difficult to work because we humans, we make errors.
Yeah.
And
You've really got two options there, right? Like you can either go to one of these big companies like Thomson Reuters or something like that and buy their entire suite, right? And I worked for a firm that did that. We left in December and we were using Canopy and Drake as the practice manager in tax software, and we came back after New Year's and we were using all Thomson Reuters suite, right?
wow.
And we as the staff just had to, and this was the 2019 tax season. So this was not only learning all new tax software, but
Oh,
this is the first year that we had Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, right? Because that all of
ah,
that started in 2018. So we were learning all new tax law, we were learning all new tax software. We had the tax software which hadn't fully updated to the new tax laws yet. That was a fun tax season. But you can either buy an entire suite that
mhm.
everything all talks together because it's all created by the same company, or you can do what most small firms have to do because they can't afford that, is you've got to go piecemeal, right?
Yeah.
Adopting all of these different softwares that do one or two specific things. They do them really well.
Mhm.
But then you've got to think about how do they talk to each other. A lot of software options out there, they have a good job. They do a good job of having open APIs, putting their API documentation out there, working with tools like Zapier or Make. But you've got to go in and build those bridges yourself among
Mhm.
all those different softwares. You can do it. It's not that hard, but you've got to give yourself some time, especially in the off season, to build those connections.
Yeah, that's the other thing too. I think that accountants have to not give themselves a hard time about not doing this work during tax time. Like,
Yes.
don't even think about it. It really is something to build in the off time and to test it in the off time.
I see people post in these Facebook groups. I see people post in, firm owners asking in February or March, hey, I'm thinking about changing my practice manager. Hey, I'm thinking about switching my tax software. And I'm like, why are you thinking about this in the spring? This is the
Yeah,
absolute worst time of the year, right? Be doing this in July, August,
yeah,
September, right? Like that's the time to do it. And don't do it in the middle of tax season, and really don't even do it around the holidays, right? Like around the
yeah,
holidays, everybody just wants to enjoy the holidays, and then they want to come back to the office after the holidays and just know what's expected of them, know that it's the same software. Don't
yeah,
do like the firm did that I worked at, and spring an entirely new software package on them right after New Year's. That was a little
yeah.
rough.
Yeah, we just read the book Build for Tomorrow, and he talked about taking what's familiar and bringing that into the new process. So
Yeah,
it's always like identifying what was in the process before that you can bring to the new process. And I have found this with clients and my team. Anytime we develop a new process that, we're like, oh, we're going to streamline, expense reporting. Okay, what's going to be the same about it? And I have found that to be really helpful. And Build for Tomorrow talks about it a lot too.
that's one of the benefits of Jason Stats. If you haven't heard of Jason Stats, he over the last year he's become a bit of an influencer in the accounting
Yeah.
profession, and I know him, and I was one of the first members of his community called Realize. If you're not a Realize member, I strongly suggest you look into that. But Jason will talk, as opposed to the sort of suite that you might buy from Thomson Reuters or something like that, right? He talks about the ecosystem, right?
Mm,
And which is another way of thinking about your tech stack. But I like
yeah.
tech stack sounds very it sounds like Lego bricks, right? That they're
Yeah.
very
But
stark, they're very
mhm.
it's just like it's hard,
It builds on
corners,
top.
rough edges,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
Exactly. Whereas your ecosystem, right, it's this organic thing, and it changes, and it's living, and it evolves over
Hmm.
time. And you get a new species that pops up and an old species that just kind of drops off, and
Hmm.
and that's natural. It's a much more natural sort of way of thinking about the different tech selections and apps that you might have. So if you're trying to think about, oh man, right, QBO, they just increased their prices, and I'm done with Intuit, so I want to try something different. Okay, it's fine, right? But maybe just sign up a new client and then try some new accounting software with that client and see
Yeah.
how it goes, right? Try to slowly, bring that new option
Mm.
into your ecosystem. Don't just wholesale change the entire tech option within your entire ecosystem, that's going to be painful. That's going to cause
Yeah.
problems for
Well,
you, your staff, your clients, right? Everybody. So, let it evolve. Give things a chance to come into the system, give things a chance to find their way out of the system.
yeah. And like you were talking about at the beginning, experimenting, but
Yes,
taking
absolutely.
that very small piece, because I think you don't know then the ins and the outs of a software until you work at it, until you've used it in a couple of situations. And then you find where are the flaws in it and what are the things it does really well. Because I'm sure you've had the experience where you've worked with, some kind of software and it says, we can do everything. And then you get in, you're like, well, kind of.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's great advice to do it a little bit at a time. And I agree with you. I like the word ecosystem because I think of that as more of a circle
Yeah.
because it's really, yeah, tech stack is like, it's that,
Yeah.
vertical stack. And
We're just building things on top of each other, right? If
yeah,
you look at these suites, if you look at, I keep using the example of Thomson Reuters suite because that's what I knew from,
yeah,
that firm. And it just like everything felt like, it just kind of built on top of each other. And if
mm,
you and I had conversations with the firm owner, toward the end of tax season when, we had a few months of learning all this new software and how it worked together. And it was almost, it wasn't regret, but it was this sense of, if I don't like any one piece of this, I can't just pull that out and replace it with something
yeah,
because now none of it will work together, right? Like I need
mhm,
all of these pieces together to make this work. And if I don't like one of these pieces, that's just too bad. I'm stuck with that. Whereas if you think about the
yeah,
ecosystem model, if you're using a practice manager and you don't really like it, guess what? You can get a new practice manager, and as long as it has the same APIs, as long as it has the same integrations, you can plug it in, right? If
yeah.
yeah, and this is a lot easier with more of the peripheral kind of thing. So, the example I like to use of that is like forecasting software, right? Like
Oh yeah,
we've got 4 or 5 decent options out there as far as forecasting and cash flow analysis and budgeting and all those kinds of softwares. And it's pretty easy to just sign up a new client, say, hey, we want to try this new software on you, do you mind being a guinea pig? And if you're
yeah,
frustrated with it, that's fine, we'll stop using it, but we think this might be a good option for you, so let's just test it out, right? And if it doesn't work, that's fine, we'll go back to spreadsheets, but for now let's just try, and see if this works, right? You can do that with one client at a
mm,
time, with one app at a time, especially with those peripheral options. Now, your tax software, your GL software, your practice manager, those
you can't
things, it's going
really,
to be harder. Now, for that, I will, if you're in a big firm, right, or if you're a partner, especially if you're a partner in a big firm, and you've kind of got this feeling of like, maybe I want to go off and do my own thing, or maybe your firm is big enough to where they'd be open to the idea of, maybe it's not creating a whole new firm, maybe just a new division,
mm,
and let's try, this will happen with firms when one firm buys another one, and
mm.
they've got to figure out a way to merge these two firms, but
Oh
they're not
yeah,
there yet because it's too close to tax season or something like that. And so they'll effectively run two different firms, even though they're under the same management, right? And so the old firm is still using its old software, and it gives them an opportunity to compare, right?
yeah,
It gives them an opportunity to see, the firm that's buying the old firm, we've never tried that software before, show us
mm,
how it works, right? Let us stress test it in the middle of tax season, because maybe we didn't pick the right software. Maybe yours is
right,
better than ours, even though we bought your firm, we might like your software better. Those kinds of things can happen. Ron Baker, the value pricing guru, right?
God, yeah,
Who's now moved on to subscription pricing.
yeah,
But again, when I first got started in this, I had no idea how pricing worked. I knew I did
yeah,
not want to do time-based billing, but I didn't know what to do instead. So one of the first books that I read about, now I'm in accounting, now I'm in business, what do I do? Was implementing value pricing, which is,
mm,
Ron's sort of, his flagship book. And I remember one of the recommendations that I think, I don't know if he says it in the book, but I know he said it, out there in podcasts and interviews that he's given, is, if you have a pricing model like hourly pricing, right, where you've got a long firm history and you've got a lot of clients who are just used to that, you can't just switch from that to value pricing or subscription pricing overnight.
no,
and it might just take too long because of all the inertia within your firm to gradually transition. Maybe you're not, maybe you just want to do this, right? You just want to make the switch. You might just need to go start a whole new firm, right? Just you know, don't quit your day job at the old firm, but just start a whole new firm and then see if that works, right? Build a whole new firm based around subscription pricing, or build a whole new firm based around value pricing. Maybe the solution for you, right, if you want to try a new practice manager, and you know, if you've got some staff, if you've got your processes well documented, if you're not absolutely critical to the operations of the old firm, maybe just go start a whole new firm and sign up, you know, 5, 10, 20 clients and see if that new practice manager or that new tax software or that new GL software works. If it doesn't, right, fine. You've only got a handful of clients that you've got to disappoint and say, actually, we're going to transition you into this new firm, right? Which is actually the old firm. They don't know the difference, right?
Yeah,
you know, so your old firm just buys out the new firm that didn't work. But it's an experiment. You have to experiment. You have to allow yourself to experiment in a controlled way.
Right.
And I think that's it's so easy to just spin up a new firm, right? You know, it really is. And so allow yourself the opportunity to provide that experimental zone for yourself.
Yeah, I love that idea. And I think that as accountants, we don't think of ourselves as being people who experiment, because we're more about, you know, following rules and making sure everything fits into the slots. So
I get it. I know we're supposed to be, you know, not politically conservative, but just conservative in terms, you know, small c conservative in terms of, right, you know, we don't want to sign up for new software and get all of our clients on it, and then that company, you know, because it was a startup, now they, you know, go bankrupt after 6 months and that software isn't there anymore, and now we've got to scramble to figure out what to do. Like, I get that pushback, especially, you know, in today's world. But at the same time, yeah, you absolutely, you know, you've got to, you can still be conservative in the main parts of your firm and with your core, you know, client roster, but you still have to, right, you owe it to businesses all the time, experiment with new product lines, with new revenue streams, with new divisions, right? You know, they'll go spin up a whole new corporation just to try a new product, right? You know, they'll take an old product and they'll completely change the labeling and the branding of it, and it's the same, you know, right? I just saw this the other day, right? Like it's not, you know, it's not Sierra Mist anymore. It's Starry, right? You know, that's Pepsi's new lemon lime drink. It's the same drink. They just completely changed the branding of it, right? You know, you can do that. You can do that with your own firm, right? If you are XYZ CPAs LLC, right? You can go start up ABC CPAs LLC and do the exact same thing, but just in a slightly different way, and see if it works.
Yeah. And I like that. I like that thought process. I really do. And I think we need to be, you're not going to evolve unless you do these experiments.
Yep. Absolutely.
Jeremy, thank you for joining us today. I really appreciate it. I think I wrote down a bunch of things, and I am all about innovation, and I can't believe I haven't heard of some of these. So I hope everybody else enjoyed this too. It was wonderful having you here, and at our accountant roundtable, and hopefully you'll be able to come back again. And
absolutely,
maybe we'll pick another subject, something about maybe time tracking.
Yeah. Oh,
I know. Isn't that a loaded question? I love. All right.
Yeah.
We'll have to talk more about that.
Wait. Yeah. Absolutely. Good deal.
I have lots of ideas about that.
Okay.
All right.
Sounds good.
It was great talking with you. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.